It's Saturday, and welcome to another episode of PO Cubed, your chronological guide to Nintendo's handheld consoles. My name's DD Ash, and this week we're playing Maru's Mission, Sunsoft Grand Prix, Skate or Die Bad and Rad, Wheel of Fortune, and Fish Dude. Let's start the show. Maru's Mission, DMG-OJ, developed by Toze and published by Jalico. You probably don't know Maru. I certainly wasn't aware of the character, or indeed the franchise. This was part of the Jaja Maru series of largely Japan-exclusive games, all that is except this one. You play as this very 90s looking kid with a baseball cap called Maru, and guess what? You gotta rescue Corey, your girlfriend. You move from left to right for the most part, through 6 worlds, while firing shurikens at people. Oh yeah, Maru's a ninja too, because, you know, 90s. Don't worry about the storylines. What's unusual about this game is there's no score, just a health bar. You start with 200 health, but it can go all the way up to 999. Killing an enemy releases their soul, which you can somehow absorb to gain a little health. When you get hit, your health is barely scratched, making this game criminally easy. Even the boss attacks don't really hurt you too bad. Although nigh invincible, your character is only a little dude, but he can jump incredibly high. Quite often he'll clear the top of the screen. A lot of enemies are avoidable this way, meaning you can cheap cut your way through much of the levels if you want. There's no ammo for your weapons, which is nice, and you can spam that button to rapidly throw many stars, killing most enemies instantly. This game's so easy that it's almost cruel. There's a plethora of other weapons to collect as well, including a weapon that replaces your shurikens with a load of meteors flying forwards, as well as one that casts down a vertical streak of lightning. Pretty epic stuff, commanding the elements like that. Makes you wonder how someone with such powers was dense enough to let his girlfriend get kidnapped. There's a wagon thing that makes you invincible for a while, and also one who summons Maru's mate, or brother, or whoever, who sort of turns up and does his thing, and then disappears. That's not nearly all of them. There are a lot of power-ups. At the midway point in each stage, there's a mini-boss, all of whom are a doddle to beat. They'll give you a weapon that you need to murder each respective end boss. Really good of them to keep each major enemy's Achilles heel in the hands of a slightly weaker enemy. Great evil genius planning right there. So, the 6 worlds you play in are, in order, North America, Romania, Greece, Egypt, Brazil, and Japan. Greece and Egypt remain in the ancient worlds that they're famous for, and of course Dracula is still roaming about the Carpathians. Like I say, don't worry about the storylines. If you need to cross the ocean at all between countries, i.e. to get from North America to Romania or Egypt to Brazil, this is done by swimming. I mean, yeah, that's how I would do it. This takes the form of a shark harpooning mini-game. They love that spearfishing thing in Japan, don't they? This is the most confusing part of the whole game. Why not take a plane, first of all? It's going to take Maru years to swim across the Atlantic, by which time Corey's probably going to have Stockholm syndromed all over the place and married her captor. What does Maru have against sharks, anyway? So, he can fire throwing stars and command lightning at his overland enemies, but now, underwater, he has to use a trident? The whole minigame is stupid, the hit detection is terrible, and if you die, you actually do game over here. Just stop it. I have to say, Maru's Mission does look pretty cool. The backgrounds are varied, and they manage to feature a lot of sprites on the screen without any considerable slowdown or flicker. The sound effects are superb, and the music is like a Double Dragon soundtrack with a comedic twist. Actually, that's not a bad way of describing the whole thing. As you progress through the game, there's some lovely variation. The third world, Greece, has this strange anti-gravity thing, like we saw later on with Wendy Every Which Way, or VVV, where you can invert gravity and walk on the ceiling. Very cool. Also in World 4, Egypt, you'll come across Sphinx. You have to answer a riddle, and if you get it right, you can skip her battle. So look, Maru's Mission is a walk in the park, and it's completely daft in places, but it's a lot of fun to blast through. There's nothing to take seriously in this game, although I do have to ask, what in the green hell is wrong with that cover art? Sunsoft Grand Prix DMG-FB, developed by Lunar and published by Ask Kodansha in Japan and Sunsoft in Europe. Despite having no involvement with the production of the original game F1 Boy, Sunsoft continued their shaky start to Game Boy publishing when porting this 1990 Japanese release to Europe and renaming it Sunsoft Grand Prix. 1992 saw Formula One at its most popular, with legends Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna battling in some of the greatest rivalries of all time, as well as a roster of amazing future talents such as Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill. So, why the hell not grab anything related to the sport and cash in, right? You're first greeted with a nice picture of your car and adulating supermodel fans blowing kisses and applauding for who I can only assume is meant to be F1 Boy, even though she's clearly a girl. You can pick between F3000, the slowest, F1 and Super. Pick a custom-length season of a single race, 4, 8 or 16 races, followed by your choice of track and how many laps, all the usual stuff. Afterwards you have a large list of engine and gearbox setups. The smaller engines are slower, but easier to control, and vice versa. You can also choose manual transmission if you like that sort of thing. These cars are even quicker. Just find one you like and stick with it. The tracks don't vary a massive amount from each other, so don't worry too much. You'll notice straight away some strange design choices. While according to the minimap you're going round a circuit, the game itself looks like a point-to-point affair with the cars moving predominantly up the screen. This is disorientating to say the least if you're trying to follow the map. You really don't feel as though you're moving around a connected track at all. It reminds me of those old Tomy racing toys you have as a kid with the stationary car and rotating background. While the music is your pretty standard but decent racing background, Sunsoft Grand Prix really lacks any sort of in-race sound effects. On a console so graphically limited, the illusion of speed is often best created with a gradient of engine roar. But here, even when you use the turbo boost, the cars are silent. Remember the recent uproar when Formula One introduced the greener, quieter engines? The Gammons of the world were mad because the cars didn't sound like racing cars anymore. Well, this is an extreme of that. Speaking of graphical limitations, this game copes pretty well. You're zoomed in quite close, and it's completely top-down, so there's no background to speak of, but what's there is alright. There's a fair bit of flicker when more than about 4 cars are on screen, due to the map overlay being drawn as sprites as well, but not much slowdown, and it doesn't hinder the gameplay. No qualifying means you always start at the back of the grid, and passing is made tough by a mixture of bad controls and immovable opponents. If you collide with another racer, you slow down, but they don't. Also, the AI never crash. You do. A lot. This is down to the controls being just stupid. Similar to how, despite the corners, the race always seems to be heading northward, your car always tries to default to the northward direction. So turning left doesn't permanently orient your car leftward. As soon as you let go of left, the car tries to revert back to a vertical position. Why the developers chose to do this, I can't fathom, but there it is. On top of this, holding a direction turns your car until it's horizontally facing that way. This sucks because a lot of track sections are at 45 degrees, meaning you have to balance between holding and releasing the direction just to go in a straight line, causing you to weave about like you've been at the post-race Cordon Rouge. The opponents don't have this problem, of course. There are plenty of racing games on the Game Boy, including several Formula One style ones. This one is kinda rubbish, and it's surely only down to the popularity of the sport that led Sunsoft Grand Prix to sell decently. It did alright, but is more of a Mark Blundell than a Nigel Mansell. Skate or Die, Bad and Rad, DMG-SK. Developed and published by Konami. Major bummer, dude. I'm about to tell you about one of the most brutal games you'll ever play. Bad and Rad isn't like the first Skate or Die game on the NES, which was essentially a bunch of mini-games. It's a bit closer to the sequel, The Search for Double Trouble, but is by no means the same as that either. You're first on this 2D street level filled with pitfalls, spikes, dogs, and all the regular city platform tropes, and need to collect what look like beer cans and ice creams along the way. Enemies will throw knives and stuff at you, but you can avoid them to a certain extent by timing jumps just right so that they hit the underside of your board. Jump with A, crouch with B, and increase speed left and right in the way you'd expect. The top speed isn't much, and it doesn't increase any more by crouching. It's not Tony Hawk's level of physics by any standard, but the movement is reasonably intuitive. After the street level, you'll enter a demented child's bedroom where after not too long a time, you'll need to fight this jester character who throws fireballs at you. You can't touch the jester at all, but basically need to deflect these projectiles back at him by ollieing and hitting them with the underside of your board. It only works if you're jumping upwards. Landing on top of a fireball hurts you. You only need to hit the guy 4 times, but the movement is very tricky to get down, and you have a strict time limit to do it. Manage to beat the first boss, and you go to an overhead vertically scrolling race down a sewer drain. This is as tricky as you like. Instant death spikes, the river coming across the pathway, guys on overhead walkways with fishing hooks that capture you and take a bunch of your precious time limit. Wow, it's frustrating. Lives are really stingy as well in this game. If you manage to make it through that hellish level, you drop down into the sewers themselves, onto another side-scrolling stage. This is actually much more pleasant to play. The difficulty of these side stages are not nearly as brutal, and if you maintain a certain speed, you can fly through them in a way that's actually a lot of fun. Don't rest though, because level 4 is incredibly tough. Racing downwards again while this giant spiked tube thing rolls after you. It's instant death, of course, all the while trying to avoid the usual traps and pits. 5 is yet another downward level, but it's somehow even more brutal. You're travelling down this half-finished bridge with instant death on both sides, crumbling sections, tons of opportunities to fall to your death, massive border-eating birds of prey, and an attack helicopter. What did this guy do? Right at the end, there's a pixel-perfect part where you have to grind on a rope, and it is impossible. Well, obviously it's not, but I just don't know how any human player could be expected to nail this part in the handful of lives it takes to get there. And if you manage to get to stage 6, well, I'll let you discover that diagonal hall of 1,000,000 deaths for yourself. The start of stage 7 is as far as I can get. I don't know what comes after that. My skills will only take me so far. The sound effects are excellent, as you might expect from a Konami title, but the music, while good, is not quite up to their high standards. It's competent and fits the theme well enough, and you won't be listening to it anyway. You've got enough to concentrate on. I love the graphics though, especially some of the boss animations and backgrounds. At first, playing what is fundamentally a skating game, I was a little disappointed that there are no kickflips or 360s to be had, but shortly you realise that you've got plenty to contend with. Lots of people hate this game, and it's easy to see why. While I think that hate is a little harsh, it is far too hard, and doesn't really test your reflexes so much as your ability to remember how the levels go. It's a test, not one of skill, but of rote learning. This game goes on and on, with ass-whooping after ass-whooping. Skate or die? Probably more of the latter, I'd say.
I told you you can't take this to work. Any teas? No more playing until you clean up your house.
Thanks to Electronic Wheel of Fortune, kids aren't the only ones who behave like children.
Oh, wow! Give me a seat.
I'm counting to 10, and then we're reading without you.
Puzzling behavior can be traced to 400 real puzzles from America's most popular game show.
I'd like to solve the puzzle.
Tomorrow, Dad, now go to sleep.
Get Electronic Wheel of Fortune with thousands of new puzzles and expansion cartridges, but please, act your age.
Wheel of Fortune, DMG-WF, developed by Data Design Interactive and published by GameTech. My ears! Make it stop! If you ever wondered what a soundtrack composed by someone with no musical or programming knowledge would sound like, this is it. Someone should have pointed out that there are actually 4 usable channels for the sound on the Game Boy, not just one. What we get is a horrendous atonal pebble dash of unsmoothed and unprocessed square waves that could have come from a ColecoVision. In fact, no, that's not fair on the ColecoVision. This is one time when I'm glad the song doesn't continue into the game. Instead, there's a nasty attempt at a clack sound for the wheel, and a couple of bloopy noises for when the letters light up. In my research, I came across the TV theme used around this time in the USA, and you can kind of hear a similarity, but it's something of a stretch. It's very rare that I give a 0 score for any category, but when the game would actually be better if it was silent, how can I justify giving even a single point? Anyway, rant over. I'm almost certain everyone knows what Wheel of Fortune is. The game show that started in the USA that was equally popular in the UK, and I'm certain many other places. There is a hangman-style word puzzle on a massive board, and 3 contestants take turns to spin a points wheel. If the wheel lands on a number, the contestant then chooses a consonant that they think might be present in the puzzle. For every letter they unveil, they get that number in points. Vowels can be purchased, and the player who solves the board wins their points total. At the end of the game, the winner plays a single round where they get to choose 5 consonants and 1 vowel, and then get 10 seconds to guess a single puzzle, in order to win a grand prize. The Game Boy version is basically that, if a little simpler. You can play a single-player game, although that's pointless, or up to a maximum of 2 players. There's a large variety of conundrums. I've yet to see a repeated puzzle, so that's at least to the game's credit, although I have a slight problem with some of them. The categories of the puzzles are one of phrase, thing, or person, amongst others. Thing is incredibly vague, and it certainly doesn't help. The first thing I had to identify was embalming fluid. Person is equally misleading. Sometimes it can be a famous person, but other times it's something stupid. I've had a final puzzle where the person in question was Roman centurion. Phrase doesn't miss out either. I've had $1 million infield and whitewash the truth before now. I don't know about American English, but those aren't phrases I've ever used. Having said that though, there's something compelling about playing Wheel of Fortune. The AI is stupid, sure. They'll pick strange letters like X or Z on their first go sometimes, and you'll find yourself calling BS occasionally at the answers. But even so, I actually do like this. It looks unfinished and sounds unstarted, but like a parent looking at their really ugly child, I wistfully sigh and admit that there's still something to love. Fish Dude, DMG-US, developed by Salio and published by Toachiki in Japan and Sofel in North America. Ever wondered what it would be like to be a fish? You have. If you want to play a video game that enables you to emulate your strange fantasy, then I give you Fish Dude. You're this average-sized fish who's just trying to get by in its average fishy life. You need to eat a certain number of smaller fish while trying to avoid getting eaten by the bigger ones. Not dissimilar to working in middle management. You can eat the little fish by pressing A. They don't seem to try to escape from you, and in a panic you can spit it out by pressing B. You have a time limit to consume all your prey because savouring food isn't really a luxury in the ocean, and you need to use B sometimes as it takes a while to eat the little fish, which leaves you really vulnerable. There are other enemies too. A fisherman, a bird, a ghost for some reason. It's the big fish you need to worry about though. Problem is, worrying about them is not going to save you. Bigger fish are usually that way for a reason. Clearly they're the successful predators, and as a result, this game is far too hard straight away. There's no difficulty curve. Fish Dude starts impossible and remains impossible. I've only seen other stages by using passwords, and not a single one of them can I beat. There's not really any viable strategy that works, you just have to hope. It wouldn't be so bad if there was some sort of defense mechanism you can employ, but no. There are a few hiding places that help for a short while, but you need to be wary of the time limit, and it's not like Metal Gear, where enemies will eventually lose interest. Oh no, as soon as you move, they're on you. Once you're caught, there's no respawning, you restart the stage. Basically, anything you can think of that the game could do to help you out doesn't exist here. The music is quite nice, pretty standard for the system at this time, and could have come from any puzzle game. I've only heard 3 songs in-game. The GBS file has a few more, but they're mostly similar. Graphically, it's pretty reasonable. Nothing flashy, but you can tell what everything is just fine. The problem is that the hitboxes aren't completely accurate. In fact, they're quite poorly programmed, so you can be swimming away and try to nimbly duck around a coral or something, only to get stuck on it. Clearly, a fish's innate ability to avoid obstacles wasn't accounted for. Boring biology fact of the day, that's called lateral line mechanoreception, kids. Fish Dude is an interesting concept that was completely ruined by being one of the most unfair and frustrating games I've ever played. Plus, it's quite expensive. Definitely one only for silly completionists like myself. Hey, maybe Fish Dude wasn't intended to be beaten. Maybe it's a metaphor for life or something. That we all get eaten by predators in the end. That there's always a bigger fish. Being a medium-sized fish sucks. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/portablepowerpodcast. Or subscribe on the YouTubes. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.